They say real love shows up when everything falls apart. That the person who swore they'd never leave will hold your hand through the darkest moments. I used to believe that. I believed it right up until the moment I woke up in a hospital bed, paralyzed from the waist down, and saw the man I'd spent 30 years building a life with, the father of my children, look at me like I was already gone. He didn't leave right away. No, that would have been too easy. He stayed long enough to tell himself he tried. Then one night, without a fight, without a word, he packed his things and disappeared. No affair. No shouting. Just, done. I thought that was it. I thought I had hit the final stage of grief, a life in a wheelchair, in a house far too quiet, waiting for a future that no longer belonged to me. Until a stranger walked through my front door. Young. Gentle. With a presence that didn't ask anything from me, except to exist. And I didn't know it then, but everything I believed about love, loyalty, and the limits of loneliness, was about to be shattered. This story contains mature themes, including abandonment, emotional trauma, and infidelity. While inspired by real-life events, all characters and events have been fictionalized for dramatic purposes. Viewer discretion is advised. My name is Gwen. I'm 56. I spent most of my life helping other people, first as a school counselor, then as a mother, a wife, a neighbor who always said yes. I was that woman. The one who remembered birthdays, made casseroles when someone's husband died, babysat without being asked. I thought doing right by everyone meant my own life would somehow stay in order. But life doesn't reward goodness. Not always. Sometimes, it just takes. Henrik and I were married for 30 years. We had 2 kids, a home with chipped paint and laughter in the halls, fights over bills, weekend barbecues. We weren't perfect, but we were solid. At least, I thought we were. Looking back now, I don't know when the drift began. Maybe it was after the kids left for college. Or maybe it was earlier, when we stopped saying I love you before falling asleep. The silences grew longer. The touches are fewer. Our house got quieter, but I mistook it for peace. Then the accident happened. It was raining that day. I remember the smell, wet asphalt and citrus from the grocery bag in the passenger seat. I'd just picked up oranges. It was supposed to be a quick trip. The light turned green. I crossed. That's all I remember. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. Tubes. Beeping. The sterile kind of quiet that makes your skin crawl. A doctor stood at the foot of my bed. He didn't smile. Just said, "You suffered a spinal cord injury. We did everything we could. But, you won't walk again." Henrik was standing beside me, but he looked far away. His face didn't crumple. He didn't cry. Just nodded. Like he already knew. Like he'd already made peace with it. At first, he stayed. He came to appointments. Paid the bills. He was responsible. But I could feel him slipping. Not in a dramatic way. It was in the little things. Like how he stopped looking me in the eyes. Or how he'd flinch when I asked for help to use the bathroom. Like my need had become his burden. 3 months after I got home, he sat across from me at the kitchen table. That's when he said it. Clear. Quiet. This isn't the life I signed up for. He left that night. Packed a bag. Took his side of the closet. And just like that, 3 decades of marriage ended with a zipper and a door closing. He left the house to me. Said I'd need the space. As if I needed 6,000 square feet of empty space. My daughter, Lila, lives in New York. My son, Boone, is in Austin. They have lives. Jobs. They check in. Holidays. Birthdays. But they're not here. Not really. I tried to do things on my own. Hired a few caregivers. Some were rude. Some didn't care. One guy scrolled through his phone while I struggled to reach a glass of water. Another walked out in the middle of the night without even telling me. You start to feel like you're not a person anymore. Just a body in a chair. Something to be fed and bathed. I felt invisible. Irrelevant. I'd sit in the garden by myself sometimes. The weeds are growing higher than the flowers. I stopped noticing. I stopped looking. I stopped feeling. Until one night, when I posted online looking for help. I didn't expect anything. The hospital was cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. It was the kind of cold that seeps into your bones, not because the air is chilled, but because the room has forgotten what warmth feels like. I lay in that bed for days, maybe weeks. Time stopped meaning anything after the second surgery. Machines blinked quietly. Nurses moved like ghosts. No one looked you in the eye for too long. Henrik sat by the window during those first few days. I remember the way his elbow rested on the edge of the chair, his fingers tapping against his chin like he was waiting for something to change. I think part of him hoped a doctor would walk in with a miracle. He held my hand, sure, but there was a kind of absence in his grip. Like someone putting on a coat they no longer wanted to wear. He didn't squeeze it. He didn't lean in. His body was there, but his mind. I could feel it drifting farther away with each day that passed. They wheeled me to physical therapy 3 times a week. I tried. God, I tried. The pain wasn't just in my body, it was in my pride. Learning how to get dressed, how to slide from the bed to the chair, how to ask someone to wipe your mouth because your hands were shaking too badly to hold a spoon. You lose a kind of dignity you didn't know you even had until it's stripped away. I could see it in Henrik's face too. That look. The one that says you've become too much. I think he hated himself for it. Maybe he hated me for needing him. His visits began to shrink. First it was just him arriving later in the day. Then he stopped staying through dinner. Then he started missing days entirely. I'd ask the nurses if he called and they'd just smile and say, he must be busy. They didn't mean to be cruel, but I could hear it in their voices. Pity is a soft poison. It settles into your skin and stays there. And still, I held on. I told myself he was just tired. That he'd come around. We had weathered storms before. I reminded myself of the man who once kissed my shoulders on the beach in Santa Monica, 15 years ago. The one who danced with me barefoot on the patio the night we paid off the mortgage. That man had carried our daughter into the emergency room when she had an asthma attack at 6 years old. That man had once loved me so fiercely I felt it in my teeth. But memory is a dangerous thing. It can convince you that what once was still is. I came home from the hospital with a suitcase full of painkillers, a list of exercises taped to the fridge, and a husband who didn't know how to look at me anymore. The house felt bigger than I remembered. Henrik wheeled me to the bedroom and set my bag down like a bellhop. He stood there, hands on his hips, staring at the bed for a few seconds before mumbling something about needing a shower. The next few weeks were a blur. The silence between us thickened. I started waking up before him just to avoid the awkwardness of asking for help getting out of bed. Meals were eaten separately. Conversations, when they happened, were clipped. He'd come home, say work was exhausting, and disappear into the office. I stopped asking if he wanted to watch TV with me. He stopped asking if I needed anything. Then one night, he sat across from me at the kitchen table. No TV on. No wine. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the ache in my spine. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't cry. He said it plainly. This isn't the life I signed up for. He went to bed. I stayed in my chair for hours, too numb to cry. When I wheeled into the bedroom the next morning, his side of the closet was empty. A single note sat on the dresser. No signature. No apology. Just silence printed in ink. He was gone. Just like that. 30 years. Gone. And I was alone. I wish I could say I was strong after Henrik left. That I rolled up my sleeves, found purpose, learned to thrive alone. But the truth is less elegant. I unraveled quietly, the way paper disintegrates under slow-running water. Days blurred into each other. My world shrank to the size of the living room, the hallway, the chair I could barely lift myself into. I stopped opening the blinds. Stopped answering phone calls. I went from woman to ghost without even realizing the shift. Caregivers came and went. Some were careless, others were just indifferent. One woman spent more time scrolling on her phone than helping me get dressed. Another walked out after 2 days, never said a word, just vanished like I didn't even deserve an explanation. I got used to it. Used to being forgotten. Used to being tolerated. Then, on a night colder than the others, I sat up in bed and opened my tablet. My arms were aching, but my mind wouldn't quiet. I wasn't looking for a connection. I wasn't looking for anything, really. I was just tired. Tired of feeling like a burden. I clicked into a caregiver forum and posted a short message. No fluff. Just what I needed. Live in. Must be patient. Must be kind. I didn't expect much. By morning, there were a dozen replies. Some copy-pasted. Some with spelling errors and no photo. A few too eager, too transactional. One guy asked if I had a gaming console. I deleted most of them without a second thought. But then I saw his message. His name was Jace Burke. The photo caught me first, sun behind him, shirtless at a beach, his smile wide and careless, like he hadn't known real disappointment yet. He looked too young. Too alive. I stared at it longer than I should have. Something about it made me feel like I had dust in my lungs. A sudden weight. A strange pull. The message was short. Said he was in school part-time for physical therapy. Had worked with seniors before. Could start tomorrow. Didn't ask what the pay was. Didn't pitch himself like a salesman. Just said he'd be there at 9. And he was. When the doorbell rang the next morning, I hesitated. My hands were shaking as I wheeled toward the front door. I almost didn't open it. Part of me expected another disaster, someone too loud, too cold, too careless. But when I pulled the door open, he was standing there with a soft expression and hands in his pockets. He was taller than I imagined. 6'7", maybe more. Dark hair, messy in the way that looks effortless. His eyes didn't scan the house or avoid my chair. They went straight to me. He said my name softly, not like a question, but like he already knew me. He didn't look shocked. Or awkward. Just a present. Grounded. I offered a weak smile and gestured for him to come in. He stepped inside and didn't fill the room with noise or empty compliments. He simply said, "Where do we start?" I don't know why that line stayed with me, but it did. Now, how can I help, or what do you need? Where do we start? Like he understood this wasn't just about caregiving. Like he knew I had been frozen for months and needed to be moved forward inch by inch. The first day was quiet. He unpacked. Put his things in the guest room. Walked the house once to understand the layout. No unnecessary small talk. But no distance either. Just ease. I remember watching him from the hallway as he folded the towels. His movements were slow, focused. Not rushed. Not robotic. Intentional. He helped me with my medication that night. Handed me a glass of water and waited. Didn't rush. Didn't look at his phone. Just stood there until I finished, then took the glass and nodded once like he was silently checking I was okay. I don't know why that felt like the kindest thing anyone had done in weeks, but it did. The next morning, he wheeled me out to the garden. The sun was barely up, the sky still streaked with pale orange. We didn't speak. Not really. He just pushed slowly along the old stone path while birds moved in the trees above us. Then he stopped, knelt down, and plucked a small wild flower from the grass. He handed it to me without a word. I held it for hours. That became our rhythm. Mornings in the garden. Evenings with a book. He offered to read aloud one night, something he brought with him, some novel I didn't care about. But his voice was deep, slow, comforting. I stopped listening to the story after a few pages. I just liked the sound of him speaking. It filled the silence in a way that didn't feel forced. Then there were the small things. He'd brush crumbs off my sweater without saying anything. Adjust the blanket over my legs with fingers that lingered just a little longer than necessary. Our hands would touch during routine tasks. And we'd pause, barely, but enough for something unspoken to pass between us. He didn't flirt. He didn't act out of place. But there was an undercurrent, something shifting in the air between us. Something I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't sure what to call it, but I felt it settling into my chest like warm rain after a long drought. I started counting the hours between his footsteps in the hallway. I started waking up before him, not to avoid discomfort like I used to with Henrik, but because I wanted to hear him say good morning. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it wasn't just care either. It was something in between. Something dangerous. That Friday evening had a quiet to it that felt deliberate. The kind of silence that presses against the walls and settles over everything like a sheet of fog. I remember thinking the air felt heavier somehow, like something was waiting. The television was on, some romantic drama neither of us had picked on purpose. It was just there. Playing in the background while the soft glow from the screen flickered across the room. Jay sat beside me on the couch, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his arm without it quite touching mine. He had his usual end-of-day softness about him. Not tired exactly, but dimmed. His energy more muted, as if he'd set something inside himself to quiet just for this space. Just for me. We didn't talk much during the movie. There wasn't a need. We'd learned to fill the room with presence instead of words. The kind of connection that doesn't need explaining. It just is. That night, though, the air between us felt different. Thicker. And I knew he felt it too. I could see it in how still he sat. In how long he let his hand rest on the throw pillow between us before slowly letting it slide just a little closer to mine. At some point, the two lead characters on screen leaned in. A kiss, slow and gentle. Their faces lit with that soft, safe kind of love that only exists in the third act of a movie. I felt my chest ache. Not with envy. Not with longing. With something more complicated. Something I didn't know how to name. And then I felt it. His hand brushed against mine. It was the lightest touch. Accidental, maybe. But neither of us pulled away. The pause that followed stretched out long and delicate. My eyes were fixed on the screen, but I wasn't watching anymore. All I could feel was the space between his fingers and mine, and the quiet question pulsing inside that moment. Then, slowly, he turned his head toward me. I didn't need to look at him to know. I could feel his gaze on the side of my face. My heart was beating in a way it hadn't in years. Not fast, exactly. Just deep. Every beat felt like it echoed into the silence between us. When I finally turned to meet his eyes, he didn't smile. He didn't blink. He just searched my face the way someone searches the horizon for an answer they're not sure they want to find. His voice was almost a whisper when he asked it. "Are you sure?" I didn't nod right away. I just looked at him. And for the first time since Henrik walked out, I felt completely seen. Not like a patient. Not like a burden. But like a woman. Like someone who could still stir something in another person. Like someone worth wanting. I nodded slowly. And that single motion unraveled something in both of us. What happened next didn't feel like passion. It wasn't wild or rushed or stolen. It felt more like surrender. Like two broken things trying, for one fleeting moment, to feel whole again. His touch wasn't hungry. It was reverent. Careful. My hands trembled. My chest ached. But my heart opened in a way I thought it had forgotten how to. He held me like I might disappear. And for a few minutes, I did. The next morning, the house was still. Morning light crept through the blinds, stretching across the carpet like a secret. Jace moved quietly. No shift in tone. No words that acknowledged what had happened. But there was something different in the air. A softness. A retreat. Like a door had been opened and then gently closed again behind him. He made my coffee. Helped with my socks. Read the weather aloud like he always did. But there was a new stillness to him. Not cold. Not regretful. Just distant. As if some part of him had stepped back into a place I couldn't follow. I told myself it was just a moment. Just one night. A slip. A need filled in a place too hollow for too long. I told myself it didn't change anything. But the truth sat heavy in my chest, quiet and unmoving. It had changed everything. I woke up quiet. Not the kind of peaceful silence that eases you into the day, but a hollow, sharp kind. The kind that lets you know something is missing before your eyes even open. The sunlight was pale through the curtains, just enough to make out the outline of the room. I reached out to the other side of the bed instinctively, not expecting anything but still hoping for warmth, for breath, for the soft weight of another body beside me. There was nothing. Just cold sheets and the sinking feeling that had started to return before I even understood why. I sat up slowly, the ache in my arms familiar now, part of the morning ritual. I turned toward the nightstand and that's when I saw it. A folded piece of paper. No envelope. No flourish. Just a quiet exit pressed into a single page. I didn't rush to open it. My hands hovered over it like they already knew what it would say. There's a strange kind of dread that comes from recognition. You see it before it speaks. And still, part of you hopes you're wrong. I unfolded the paper. I'm sorry. You deserve someone who's not still broken inside. That was it. No name. No date. Just that one sentence. A full ending in 10 words. I sat there with the note resting in my lap, my fingers gripping the edges too tightly. My chest felt tight, like someone had placed a stone behind my ribs. I didn't cry. Not then. I just stared at the wall, blinking slowly, as if the room might shift or rewind or explain itself. I grabbed my phone. Dialed his number. It rang once, then straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I called again. Then again. The tone never changed. Hi, this is Jace. Leave a message. My fingers hovered over the screen. I typed a message. Then erased it. Typed another. Backspaced. My hands were shaking, my mind folding in on itself. Please call me. Just tell me why. Sent. Nothing. I stared out the window, willing his car to reappear in the driveway. Willing this to be a mistake. But the gravel was undisturbed. The engine never came. There was no sound of keys or footsteps or the quiet clink of his coffee mug on the kitchen counter. There was just silence. The worst kind. It wasn't about the night before. It wasn't shame or guilt that cut me open. It was the familiar shape of abandonment. The feeling of being left, again, in the middle of a house that was too big for just one person. Of being chosen for a moment, only to be discarded by morning. This heartbreak didn't come from betrayal. It came from the realization that I had allowed myself to hope. That I had cracked open something in me I thought was gone forever. And that opening was now bleeding with the knowledge that maybe I was just a temporary shelter for people passing through. And once again, I was alone. The first few days after he left were quiet in that sharp, aching way. Not just empty, but loud with the absence of things I hadn't realized I'd started depending on. The click of the kettle. His voice read a paragraph aloud. The sound of his footsteps walking past my door in the early morning, careful not to wake me. All gone. The silence now was a different kind than the one Henrik had left behind. This one came after hope. And that made it worse. I didn't fall apart in some dramatic way. There were no broken dishes or screaming fits or public collapses. I just stopped. I stopped listening to music. I stopped caring what time I went to bed. I stopped opening the window blinds. Everything felt too heavy. The air. My limbs. The thought of pretending I was fine again. I stayed like that for a while. Not sleeping, just lying awake and watching the ceiling fade from dark to gray each morning. I would think about the note, folded neatly on my nightstand, as if kindness had been wrapped in cruelty and left like a gift. I read it once, maybe twice, then tucked it into the drawer. But I could feel it there. The weight of it. Pressing through the wood like it was whispering something I wasn't ready to hear. Lila started calling more. At first I didn't answer. I let the phone ring until the voicemail picked up, her voice so cheerful it felt like a different world. But she kept calling. Day after day. And eventually, I picked up. I said I was fine. She didn't believe me, but she didn't push. She just said she missed me. Maybe she could come visit soon. I didn't say no. A few days later, I called my sister. Florence had always been blunt in a way that made people either love her or avoid her. I'd done a little of both over the years. We hadn't spoken much since the accident. I think I'd convinced myself that reaching out would make my pain too real. But this time, I needed something real. Even if it stung. She answered on the second ring and said, "Took you long enough." We didn't talk about the accident. Or Henrik. Or Jace. We just talked. About old memories. About bad movies. About her awful neighbor who still let his dog bark at midnight. And for the first time in months, I laughed. That night, I went back online. Not to post another ad. Not to scroll through endless strangers. I searched for something else. A support group. Anything that might tether me to people who understood. That's how I found the community. Spinal injury survivors. Some are newly injured. Some who had been living with paralysis for decades. Stories poured in. Some heartbreaking. Some hope. And slowly, I began to participate. Comment. Shared. Listened. For the first time, I didn't feel like a patient or a ghost. I felt like someone who belonged somewhere again. And in all that quiet rebuilding, a realization began to take shape. Jace wasn't the mistake. He was a moment. A mirror. A reminder that I was still capable of feeling, of needing, of reaching for warmth even when it hurt. The mistake wasn't him. The mistake was believing that I needed someone else to feel whole. Loneliness is seductive. It makes you believe any hand reaching toward you must be love. But love isn't about rescue. And wholeness isn't something someone else hands you. It's something you pick up piece by piece, after you've been broken and left and forgotten and still managed to open your eyes the next morning. I still think about him sometimes. Not in the way I used to, not with longing or ache. Just in quiet recognition. He was kind. Maybe too kind. Maybe he saw in me something he was trying to fix in himself. And maybe I mistook care for connection. That's something I'm still learning to tell apart. But I don't regret it. Not any of it. Because now, when I sit in the garden and the breeze moves through the leaves, I don't feel like I'm waiting for someone anymore. I just sit. I feel the sun. I breathe. I am still here. The garden is quiet again now. I come out here most evenings, just as the sun begins to dip below the fence line. The wind moves gently through the trees, and the sky turns that soft, bruised shade of blue before it settles into night. I sit with a blanket over my legs, the cushion behind my back, and a single flower in my lap. Just like before. But this time, the silence doesn't feel empty. It feels earned. There's a kind of peace that only comes after you've lost yourself completely and chosen to rebuild anyway. Not with grand declarations or dramatic new chapters, but with small choices. Answering a phone call. Opening the window. Saying yes to a visit. Forgiving someone, maybe even yourself. I've made my peace with the fact that some things won't make sense. That not every moment is meant to be permanent. That sometimes the people who awaken you are only passing through. But still. I want to ask you something. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever wanted something just because it reminded you that you were alive? Tell me. I really want to know.